The first contraction hit while I was still running. Not labor, not yet. Just my body's warning that time was running out, that the 5 lives inside me were as hunted as I was. My name is Sarah, and 3 nights ago, I became the most dangerous thing in the werewolf world. A rejected omega carrying quintuplets that shouldn't exist. The snow was deep enough to swallow my legs with each step. My breath came in ragged clouds. Behind me, the hunting howls were getting closer, sharper, hungrier. They've been tracking me for 72 hours. My former pack, the wolves who'd called me liar when I told them about the 5 heartbeats, who'd called me cursed when the healers confirmed it, who'd voted unanimously to end me before the abomination inside me could be born. I pressed my hand to my swollen belly. 5 rapid heartbeats fluttered against my palm like trapped birds. 5 impossible lives that broke every law of werewolf nature. No omega had carried more than twins in 3 generations. Quintuplets were myth, legend, the kind of thing that only happened in prophecies that ended kingdoms. My wolf whimpered inside me. She'd gone nearly silent since my mate died, since Marcus fell in a border raid that never should have happened, leaving me alone with a pregnancy no one believed was real. The ground beneath me shifted. I went down hard, palms slamming into frozen earth, snow burning my face. Pain exploded through my stomach, and I gasped, curling protectively around my belly. "Get up," I hissed to myself. "Get up now, or they'll rip these pups out before your heart stops beating." I could smell them now, my former packmates. Blood and fury and righteousness. They thought they were doing the moon goddess a favor, ending the cursed Omega before she birthed monsters. I forced myself to my feet. My legs shook. My vision blurred. But I moved forward because stopping meant death. Then I saw them, ancient stones rising from the snow like broken teeth. Border markers carved with runes that pulsed with warning even through the blizzard. Symbols I'd heard about in whispered stories, but never seen. Northern Crown territory, Alpha King Dominic's land. The stories about him were nightmare fuel. A king who showed no mercy to trespassers, who executed first and asked questions never, who ruled the largest pack in the north with an iron fist and a cold heart. Behind me, wolves materialized from the storm, 7 of them, led by Garrett, my former beta, his scarred muzzle pulled back in a snarl. "End of the line, Sarah," he growled, shifting into his human form despite the freezing wind. "You've run far enough." I backed against the largest border stone. The cold seeped through my torn cloak. "Please, just let me go. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." "Can't do that." Another wolf shifted. Elena, who'd been my closest friend before the pregnancy. Her eyes held no warmth now. "You're carrying abominations. The moon goddess herself has judged you." "They're just pups," I whispered. "Innocent lives. Nothing about this is innocent." Garrett stepped closer. 5 pups from 1 omega. It's unnatural. Wrong. If they're born, they'll bring catastrophe. The old texts are clear. My wolf surged forward, desperate and cornered. Marcus wanted them. He died believing they were a miracle. Marcus was a fool. Elena's words were knives. "And you're a liar who seduced him into believing your fantasy." They were going to kill me, kill my pups, and there was nothing I could do to stop them. A 6th contraction hit, harder than the others. I doubled over, and Garrett lunged. He never reached me. The air exploded with new wolves, massive silver-pelted beasts that moved like liquid death through the snow. They formed a wall between me and my former pack, and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Garrett froze mid-step. "Blessed moon!" The largest silver wolf stepped forward. Even unconscious from pain, I felt the weight of his presence. Ancient, absolute, terrifying. He shifted. and my breath caught. The man standing before me was carved from winter itself, tall, broad-shouldered, but with black hair threaded with silver and scars mapping his bare chest. His eyes burned molten gold, alpha eyes that could compel submission with a glance. Alpha King Dominic. "You're trespassing," he said softly, not looking at Garrett. His gaze was locked on me, specifically on my belly. "Alpha King." Garrett's voice shook. "This Omega is pack business. She fled lawful judgment." "Quiet." One word. Garrett's mouth snapped shut like a trap. Dominic moved toward me with predatory grace. I should have been terrified, should have run. But my wolf did something impossible. She recognized him. Not as mate, Marcus had been my mate, but as something else. Something primal that made every instinct go still. Dominic knelt in the snow, not submitting, not bowing, but lowering himself until his eyes were level with mine. "Why, how many?" His voice was rough velvet. I should have lied, should have said 1, maybe 2, but his eyes held mine with such intensity that truth fell from my lips before I could stop it. 5, silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then Dominic did something that shattered everything I knew about the cold Alpha King. He placed his hand against the snow near my belly, closed his eyes, and listened. His elite guard went utterly still. My former pack stared in shock. Seconds stretched. Then Dominic's eyes opened, and something raw flickered across his face before his expression hardened into certainty. "I hear them," he said quietly. 5 heartbeats, strong, real. My wolf stirred for the first time in weeks. Dominic rose to his full height and turned toward Garrett. "You have 3 seconds to leave my territory. On the 4th, I'll personally ensure you stop breathing." "You don't understand. She's an abomination." The largest silver wolf snarled, lips pulling back from fangs like daggers. Garrett stumbled backward. "This isn't over." "Yes," Dominic said, dangerously soft. "It is." My former pack fled into the storm. I tried to thank him, tried to ask what happened next, but my body reached its limit. The adrenaline that had kept me moving for 3 days evaporated. My vision tunneled, my legs buckled, strong arms caught me before I hit the ground. Dominic lifted me like I weighed nothing, cradling me against his furnace-hot chest. "Stay with me," he commanded. It wasn't a request. My eyes fluttered closed. When they opened again, I was staring at an ornate ceiling carved with silver moons. Silk sheets covered my body. Warmth surrounded me. And beside my bed, standing like a sentinel, was the Alpha King who'd stopped the world in 3 seconds flat. What I didn't know was that saving my life would cost him his kingdom, or that my 5 impossible pups would burn his entire world to ash. Chapter 2. The Palace of Iron. The palace was beautiful the way a weapon was beautiful. All sharp edges and cold perfection. Every surface gleamed with silver inlay that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Moon symbols stared from archways, tapestries, the very stones themselves. It should have felt safe. It didn't. I'd been in the Northern Crown Palace for 3 days. 3 days of healers probing my belly with glowing hands and horrified faces. 3 days of whispered conversations outside my door that cut off the moment I approached. 3 days of Alpha King Dominic watching me like I was a bomb about to detonate. "The healers are waiting," my guard said. A female warrior named Kira with ice blue eyes and a permanent scowl. She hadn't given me her name. I'd overheard another guard use it. The healing chamber smelled of sage and moonflower. 3 healers waited inside, all wearing the silver crescent pins that mark them as court-appointed. Their expressions ranged from clinical curiosity to barely concealed revulsion. "Lie down," the eldest commanded. I obeyed, my hand instinctively covering my belly. The healer's magic tickled as it probed, counting, confirming what no one wanted to believe. The eldest healer pulled back sharply, face draining of color. Blessed moon, it's true. What's true? The male healer demanded. His magic swept over me, and he froze. Ha, that's impossible. 5 distinct heartbeats, the second woman breathed. 5 complete souls. Silence dropped like a stone. When was the last silver litter? The eldest asked quietly. 73 years ago, the male healer replied, voice shaking. The moonborn quintuplets. He stopped, exchanging loaded glances with his companions. They what? My wolf stirred uneasily. No one answered. By evening, the entire court knew. I felt the weight of their stares as I was escorted to the dining hall. Not to eat with the court, but to be presented. Displayed like a curiosity, Dominic sat at the head of a massive table, his expression unreadable as nobles and warriors filled the space with barely controlled chaos. Prophecy, someone hissed. Abomination, another countered. Neither the texts speak of silver litters, children born to reshape power itself. The texts also speak of how they tear kingdoms apart. I stood frozen in the doorway as factions formed before my eyes. Some nobles looked at me with hunger, seeing opportunity. Others looked at me with naked fear, making warding gestures as if I carried plague. Dominic hadn't spoken. He simply watched, silver eyes tracking every reaction. She's manipulated him somehow, a voice carried from a cluster of older nobles. Look at her, a broken Omega with a fantastical story. The Alpha King would never... Mind your tongue, Dominic said softly. The entire hall went silent, or lose it. But the damage was done. I felt it settling into my bones. The suspicion, the accusation. They thought I'd seduced him, bewitched him, used my impossible pregnancy to gain power I had no right to claim. My wolf snarled, pushing against my skin for the first time in months. Then pain lanced through my belly. Sharp, wrong, not labor, something else, something cold spreading through my veins like poison. I gasped, hand flying to my stomach as another wave hit. My knees buckled. Dominic was there before I hit the ground, moving with impossible speed. His arms locked around me as nobles scattered backward. The healers, he commanded, now. The eldest healer arrived within seconds, her face grave. My lord, the palace wards, they're rejecting her. Explain. The stones were built to suppress rare bloodlines, to prevent unnatural succession. Her pregnancy is... She hesitated. The palace itself is trying to end it. Dominic's expression turned to stone. Then the palace is wrong. The bleeding started at dawn. I awoke to warmth spreading between my thighs, not water breaking, the slow, terrifying crimson of something going catastrophically wrong. I pressed my hand to my belly. The 5 heartbeats that had been strong yesterday now fluttered weakly, irregularly, like birds dying in a cage. No, I whispered. No, no, no. The healers came quickly. What they found made the eldest healer's face crumple with pity and horror. The wards are ancient, she explained as Dominic stood rigid beside my bed, built during the succession wars, designed to prevent bloodline manipulation, to suppress pregnancies that could threaten the natural order of power. She shook her head. 5 pups. The stones read it as a threat. They're actively working against her body. How long? Dominic's voice was carefully controlled, but I heard the fury coiled beneath. 3 days, maybe 4. Then the pups will be too weak to survive. Solutions. Now. Move her to a village outside the ward boundaries. No, another healer interrupted. She's too weak to travel. Moving her could trigger full labor. None of the pups would survive. The door burst open. Court members flooded in, talking over each other. This is a sign, an elderly noble proclaimed. The stones themselves reject this unnatural. End it, someone hissed from the back. End the pregnancy before it kills her and solves our problem cleanly. Dominic's roar silenced them all. Out! They fled. Only the eldest healer remained. My lord, you must decide. Leave us. She bowed and withdrew. The silence settled like snow. I lay against silk pillows, hands pressed to my belly, feeling my children dying by degrees. I'll leave, I said quietly. Tonight, I'll take my chances on the road. You won't make it a mile. Then I'll die trying instead of lying here while your palace murders my children. Dominic moved to the window, back rigid. The stones are older than my bloodline, older than the crown. They've stood for 3 centuries. Then I'm sorry for the inconvenience of dying in your guest room. He turned, and the expression on his face stole my breath. Not anger, something raw and almost fragile. You think I would let that happen? What choice do you have? Nothing is immovable. He crossed to my bedside, kneeling so our eyes were level. You carried 5 lives through winter and wolves and rejection. You survived when the entire world wanted you dead. His hand hovered near mine, not quite touching. Those pups deserve to live, and they deserve a palace that doesn't try to kill them. How exactly do you plan to achieve that miracle? Dominic stood, his expression shifting from vulnerability to absolute determination. You'll stay in this room. You'll eat. You'll rest. You'll keep those pups alive. That's an order. I'm not commanding the stones. His eyes blazed gold. I'm commanding every mason, every runesmith, every architect in my kingdom. He moved toward the door. If the palace won't protect my future, then I'll build one that will. Wait, what are you saying? He paused at the threshold. I'm saying the stones have 3 days to change. His smile was sharp as winter. Or I'll tear them down myself. Chapter 3, The Reconstruction. The hammering started before sunset. From my window, I watched as sections of the palace were carefully dismantled. Not destroyed, methodically taken apart by craftsmen who moved with reverent precision. Runesmiths traced glowing patterns in the air, testing magical flows, mapping the suppressant energies woven into the foundation. The eastern wing is worst, Dominic said, appearing in my doorway 3 days later. He was covered in stone dust and looked more alive than I'd ever seen him. Built during the succession wars specifically to prevent multiple births, we've redirected it entirely. You're actually doing this. My voice caught. You're rebuilding a 3-century-old palace because it was wrong. He crossed to my window. It's standing close enough that I could feel his warmth. The stones were laid in fear of power, fear of change, fear of anything that couldn't be controlled. His hand rested on the windowsill beside mine, not quite touching. I won't rule through fear. Below, workers installed massive moonwood beams, their silver grain catching the fading light. Runesmiths carved new patterns, not suppressant, but amplifying, protective, life-giving. 5 cradles, Dominic continued quietly, carved from moonwood, harvested during the last lunar eclipse. They'll be placed beneath an open skylight so the moon can touch your children before the world does. My breath caught. Why? Why what? Why are you doing this? I'm nobody, an Omega who stumbled across your borders half dead. You could have turned me away, executed me for trespassing, sent me to any village beyond your ward boundaries. Dominic turned to face me fully. The intensity in his golden eyes made my wolf surge forward, fully awake for the first time since Marcus's death. The palace exists to serve the crown, he said. The crown exists to protect the future. You're carrying 5 futures. He took my hand, the first time he'd truly touched me, beyond carrying my unconscious body. His calloused fingers were gentle against my palm. Every time I close my eyes, I hear their heartbeats. 5 lives fighting to exist in a world that wants them dead. If I do nothing, I'm no different than the wolves who hunted you. His grip tightened slightly. I won't be that king. Something cracked open in my chest. not breaking, blooming. "Thank you," I whispered. Dominic's thumb brushed across my knuckles once before he released my hand. "Don't thank me yet. We still have work to do. But here's what I need from you. If you're feeling what Sarah's feeling right now, if you believe these 5 pups deserve to survive, hit that subscribe button for Kismet Romance Collection. Let me know in the comments. Would you rebuild a kingdom for love? Your support decides which stories I bring to life next. Now let's see if Dominic can finish what he started." He left to oversee the night shift. I didn't see the elderly noble slip from the shadows of the corridor. Didn't see him pen a message with shaking hands. Didn't see the raven launch from the tower window, carrying word to the black wolves still circling beyond the borders. She's vulnerable. The Alpha King is distracted. Strike during the full moon. New 3 days. The conspiracy met in a chamber that didn't officially exist. A forgotten stone room beneath the oldest wing where the original wards still pulsed with ancient, unaltered magic. Lord Casimir, eldest of the noble houses, spread a map across the table. "The full moon rises in 2 days," he said. "The Alpha King will be in the Eastern Territories, suppressing the rebellion." "A rebellion you orchestrated," another noble observed dryly. "A rebellion that was necessary." Casimir's eyes were cold. "Dominic has lost his mind, tearing apart our ancestral palace for an Omega carrying abominations. He's made us weak, vulnerable. If we're caught, we won't be." Casimir traced a line on the map. "The Black Wolves will breach the outer walls here, will ensure the gates remain unguarded during shift change, where they'll reach the Omega's chamber before anyone realizes what's happening. And if they're questioned, they won't survive long enough to be questioned." Casimir's smile was thin. "We'll arrive just in time to defend the palace. The Omega and her unnatural brood will be dead. Dominic will return to find his mad project ended. He'll know we betrayed him. He'll suspect, but he won't have proof. And by then, the reconstruction will be halted. The palace will be restored. Life will return to normal." The letter was dispatched within the hour. I woke to wrongness, not pain, not yet, but a sense of disturbance that made my wolf pace restlessly. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling the 5 heartbeats that had grown stronger over the past week as the palace wards were slowly realigned. The reconstruction was nearly complete. Its new walls gleamed with fresh silver inlay. The 5 moonwood cradles sat in my chamber beneath the open skylight, waiting. Dominic had worked alongside his craftsmen for 12 straight days, his hands as blistered as any laborer's. But yesterday, urgent word had come from the Eastern Territories. Rebellion. Villages burned. Dominic had left within hours, taking his elite guard with him. "It's just until I return," he'd said, standing in my doorway one last time. 3 days, 4 at most. Now those words felt ominous. I moved to my window. The palace grounds were too quiet, guards sparse, shadows too deep in places that should have been lit. I pressed my hand against the new stone wall and felt something I'd never felt before. The palace was humming, not the cold, suppressant pulse of the old wards, but something warm, responsive. Almost aware, my wolf surged forward, and suddenly I understood the rebuilt palace wasn't just neutrally protective, it had been keyed to me, to my blood, to my children. Dominic had built me a palace that would recognize me as its heart. A cramp twisted through my belly, sharp but brief, not labor, a warning. The pups were restless, sensing their mother's fear. "Not tonight," I whispered, hand moving in soothing circles. "Please not tonight. Your father isn't here." Another cramp, stronger. I stumbled to the door, pulling it open. The corridor was empty, no guard, no servants, just shadows and moonlight and silence. Wrong. Everything was wrong. I retreated into my chamber, grabbing the knife Dominic had left on my nightstand. I positioned myself between the door and the cradles. The palace hummed louder, its magic resonating through the stones. I felt it reaching toward me, trying to warn me, trying to protect me, but the new wards weren't fully settled yet. They couldn't act without me. Another cramp seized me, harder, accompanied by a trickle of warmth that might have been water breaking or might have been blood. Not now, I gasped. Please not. The war horn sounded, 3 long, desperate blasts that shattered the night's silence. The attack had begun, and somewhere too far away to help, Dominic would be hearing those same horns and realizing he'd been played. My water broke fully, soaking through my nightgown. Labor had begun. I was alone, and the wolves were coming. Chapter 4, Blood and Moonlight. The gates opened from the inside. I heard the grinding of ancient mechanisms, the clash of steel, then the howls, dozens of them. It's pouring through breaches that should have been impossible. Black wolves flooded the palace grounds like a dark tide, eyes gleaming with bloodlust and purpose. Another contraction tore through me. I doubled over, clutching the edge of the moonwood cradle. My body had made its choice. The pups were coming tonight, battle or no battle. My lady! Kira burst through the door, bloodied and wild-eyed. We have to move you. I can't. My voice came out as a growl, my wolf surging forward. They're coming now. Then I'll hold the door. She shifted into a massive gray wolf, positioning herself at the threshold as combat echoed through the corridors. I staggered to the birthing bed Dominic had commissioned. Low, wide, positioned directly beneath the open skylight where moonlight poured down like liquid silver. I stripped off my soaked nightgown, near my body moving on instinct, on something older than thought. The palace hummed around me, its new wards resonating with my pain, my fear, my fierce determination to survive. Please, I thought desperately, Dominic built you to protect us, so protect us. The black wolves reached my corridor. Kira met them with savage fury, taking down the first 2 before sheer numbers overwhelmed her. She fell with a warrior's cry, buying me precious seconds. 3 wolves crashed through the doorway, muzzles pulled back in snarls. The lead wolf shifted, scarred, familiar. Garrett from the night at the border. Finally, he rasped, drawing a silver blade. Time to end this abomination. He stepped across the threshold. The palace ignited. Silver light exploded from every surface. Walls, floor, ceiling, burning with lunar fire that responded not to ancient protocols, but to the Omega giving birth beneath the skylight. The wards Dominic had rebuilt recognized my blood, my pain, my children fighting to enter the world. Garrett screamed as silver fire consumed him from the inside out. His companions tried to retreat, but the threshold had become a barrier of pure, burning magic. They were died before they reached the corridor, bodies crumbling to ash. I barely noticed. The first pup was crowning, and the pain was so immense it whited out everything else. I bore down, screaming my defiance at the moon, and the battle, and the world that wanted my children dead. The first pup slid into my hands, tiny, perfect, wailing with fierce life. A girl. I had no time to do more than ensure she was breathing before the next contraction hit. I laid her in the first cradle and surrendered to my body's demands. More wolves tried to breach the chamber. The palace burned them all. Silver light cascaded through the corridors like a living thing, seeking out threats, igniting anything that meant harm to the Omega in labor. The rebuilt wards had become a weapon, and I was its trigger. The second pup came faster, a boy. The third, another girl. My world had narrowed to pain and purpose. Blood soaked the birthing bed. My body trembled with exhaustion. But I could feel 2 more heartbeats inside me, fighting to break free. The battle sounds changed. A roar split the night, deeper, more primal than any wolf I'd heard before. It resonated through stone and bone, carrying rage and promise and absolute violence. Dominic had returned. I felt him through the palace itself, through the wards key to my blood that recognized him as protector, as mate, as the one who'd rebuilt the world for my children. He tore through the invading wolves like a force of nature, his massive silver form leaving carnage in his wake. The fourth pup began to crown as Dominic reached my corridor. He shifted mid-run, bursting through the doorway covered in blood that wasn't his, eyes wild until they found me alive, fighting, bringing our future into the world despite the chaos. "You came back," I gasped, "always." He moved to my side, his hand finding mine as another contraction hit. "I will always come back." The fourth pup, a boy, was born into his father's hands. Dominic placed him gently in his cradle, then returned to my side as the final contraction built. This one was different, stronger, urgent. The last child, a fighting hardest of all, I bore down with everything I had left. The fifth pup, the smallest, a girl with silver-touched fur, slid into the world as the full moon reached its zenith. Her cry echoed through the palace like a bell, and every remaining invader fell where they stood, the wards responding to completion, 5 lives born, 5 futures secured. The battle was over. I collapsed back against blood-soaked pillows, body trembling with exhaustion so profound I could barely keep my eyes open. But I forced them to stay focused on the 5 cradles arranged in a perfect circle beneath the skylight, each one holding a small, squirming, impossibly alive pup. 5 heartbeats that had sustained me through winter and wolves and rejection. 5 lives that had reshaped a kingdom. Dominic knelt beside the birthing bed, still covered in battle gore. His hand found mine with a gentleness that contradicted the violence carved into every line of his body. He said nothing, just pressed his forehead to my knuckles and breathed. The chamber doors opened. Warriors flooded in, weapons drawn, then stopped dead at the threshold. 5 pups, all breathing, all alive. Dominic's elite guard, wolves who'd fought their way back with him through rebel territories and invading forces, did something I'd never seen before. They bowed, not to Dominic, to me, to the children, to something ancient and inevitable that even they couldn't fully name. "Crownborn," one whispered. The words spread like wildfire. The healers came next, faces pale with awe and terror as they examined each pup with shaking hands. "Healthy," the eldest pronounced, voice breaking. "All 5. "Perfect." She looked at me with something like reverence. "This has not happened in living memory." 73 years, Dominic said quietly, still holding my hand. "The moon-born quintuplets. They remade the pack borders." "Change the balance of power for generations," the healer whispered. "Then it's fortunate," Dominic said, eyes never leaving my face, "that these 5 will have parents who will ensure they reshape the world for the better." Movement at the door. Warriors dragged 3 nobles into the chamber, Lord Casimir and his conspirators, fine clothes torn, faces bruised from interrogation. "The traitors, my lord," the captain reported. "They confessed to opening the gates, to coordinating with the Black Wolves, to planning the Omega's murder." Dominic finally released my hand and stood. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. "You conspired to murder an Omega in labor," he said, voice soft and absolutely lethal. "You betrayed your oath, your kingdom, your crown." He stepped closer to Casimir. "Give me one reason I shouldn't execute you myself." Casimir's face twisted with defiance, even in defeat. "Because she's made you weak." Dominic's hand moved faster than thought, wrapping around the noble's throat. "She survived what would have killed anyone else. carried 5 lives when the world said it was impossible, gave birth during a siege while the palace burned around her. His grip tightened. That's not weakness, Casimir. That's strength you'll never comprehend. He released him, letting him crumple to the floor. Take them to the executioner's block. At dawn, let every noble, every warrior, every citizen see what happens to those who threaten the future of this kingdom. The traitors were dragged away, pleas for mercy swallowed by stone corridors. Silence settled over the birthing chamber. Dominic returned to my side, fury melting away as he looked at our children. They need names. Tomorrow, I whispered, exhaustion finally claiming me. Let them sleep tonight as they are, 5 hearts under 1 moon. Dominic pulled a chair to my bedside, his hand finding mine again. Then I'll keep watch. You need rest too. I'll rest when I know you're safe. His thumb traced gentle circles on my palm. Sleep, Sarah. I won't leave. I believed him. Chapter 5, The Moonborn Crown. They carried me to the great hall on a litter draped in silver silk. Not because I was fragile, but because my body had given everything to bring 5 lives into the world and deserved to be honored for it. I wore a gown the color of moonlight, my dark hair braided with winter flowers, and cradled in my arms was the smallest of my daughters, the 5th born who'd fought hardest to enter the world. The great hall was packed, every noble who'd survived the purge, every warrior who'd defended the palace, every citizen granted entry stood in absolute silence as I was brought before the dais where Dominic waited. He wore the full regalia of the Alpha King, black and silver, ancient and imposing, but his eyes were soft as they found mine. The litter was lowered. I stood on trembling legs, my wolf lending me strength, and walked the final steps alone. The crowd held its breath. Dominic descended from the dais. Then, before the entire kingdom, the Alpha King of the Northern Crown went to one knee. Gasps rippled through the hall. "Sarah," he said, voice carrying to every corner despite its quietness. "You came to my borders hunted, rejected, carrying lives the world called impossible. You survived winter and wolves and a palace that tried to kill you." He took my free hand, pressing it to his forehead in a gesture of reverence, so profound that tears burned behind my eyes. "You gave birth during a siege, refused to flee, brought 5 perfect children into this world through strength I've witnessed in no warrior, no ruler, no legend." He raised his head, golden eyes blazing. "You are not an Omega under my protection. You are my mate, my equal, my Luna." His voice rang out, and any who doubt it can face me and challenge. No one moved. No one dared. As Dominic stood and turned to face the crowd, these 5 pups, these children born under a bleeding moon, surviving what should have been impossible. They are crown-born. The future of this kingdom flows through their veins. He gestured to where the other 4 pups rested in moonwood cradles held by trusted guardians. They will be raised, not in the shadow of prophecy or fear, but in the light of what their mother taught us all. That strength is not about power, but survival. That love is not weakness, but the fiercest protection there is. A warrior stepped forward, the eldest of Dominic's guard. "What shall we call them, my lord?" Dominic looked to me. "That choice belongs to their mother." My throat tightened. I looked down at the tiny pup in my arms, then at the 4 others sleeping peacefully despite the crowd. "Thalia," I said softly, naming the firstborn, Marcus. For my lost mate, Ilara, Rowan, I kissed the forehead of the smallest. And this one, Luna, for the moon that witnessed everything. "Thalia, Marcus, Ilara, Rowan, and Luna," Dominic repeated, voice ringing through the hall. "The moonborn quintuplets, the children who remade the Northern Crown." The crowd erupted, not in polite applause, but in genuine, thunderous celebration. Warriors howled, nobles bowed, citizens wept. Furthermore, Dominic said, his hand settling on the small of my back, this palace, rebuilt stone by stone to shelter the future, instead of suppressing it, will no longer bear only my name. He turned to me. It will be called the Palace of Five Moons, so that every generation remembers the Omega who survived and the children who changed everything. Chapter 6. The Beginning. That night, or after the ceremony ended and the crowds dispersed, I stood in my chamber beneath the open skylight. The 5 cradles were arranged in their circle, each pup sleeping peacefully, tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. I remembered kneeling in the snow with wolves circling, certain I would die. I remembered the healers who'd called me cursed, the villages that had turned me away, the endless winter that had tried to claim me. I remembered collapsing against ancient border stones, accepting death, only to find salvation in golden eyes and impossible mercy. Dominic came to stand beside me, his arm wrapping around my waist. "They'll write stories about this," he murmured. I leaned into his warmth, watching moonlight paint silver across my sleeping children. Let them. Because I had lived the impossible, and tomorrow I would do it again. The moon hung full and bright above the open skylight, its light touching each of my children like a benediction. 5 impossible lives, 5 futures that had reshaped a kingdom, 5 heartbeats that had carried me from death's door to a crown I never asked for, but would wear with pride. Dominic's hand found mine, fingers intertwining. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "Now," he pressed a kiss to my temple. "Now we raise 5 children who will change the world. We rebuild what was broken. We prove that the strongest kingdoms aren't built on fear, but on the courage to protect what matters most." I looked up at him. And what matters most? His golden eyes held mine, fierce and tender all at once. "You, them, this." He gestured to the palace around us, the kingdom beyond. A future where impossible things become real, where rejected omegas become queens, where 5 pups no one believed could survive grow up to rewrite every law that tried to erase them. My wolf stirred, content for the first time since Marcus's death, not because she'd forgotten her first mate, but because she'd found something new, something equally true, a partner, a protector, an alpha who'd torn down a palace and rebuilt it for love. "I used to think the moon was cruel," I whispered, "that it watched suffering and did nothing. And now I looked at my 5 sleeping children, each one touched by moonlight. Now I think maybe it was waiting, watching for the moment when impossible things aligned, when a rejected omega and a ruthless king would meet at a border stone and change everything." Dominic's arm tightened around me. "Then the moon chose well." A soft cry came from one of the cradles, Luna, the smallest, stirring in her sleep. I moved to her side, lifting her gently. She settled against my chest, her tiny heartbeat fluttering against mine. Dominic joined me, looking down at our daughter with an expression I'd never seen on the feared alpha king's face. Wonder, pure, unguarded wonder. "She's so small," he breathed. "She's a fighter." I kissed Luna's forehead. "They all are. They had to be, to survive this long. They have their mother's strength, and their father's stubbornness." He laughed, a sound I'd rarely heard from him. "A dangerous combination." "The most dangerous," I agreed, smiling. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching our children sleep. Outside, the palace, our palace of 5 moons, hummed with protective magic. Its wards keyed to the family it was built to shelter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The prophecies surrounding moonborn quintuplets weren't all favorable. There would be those who feared my children's power, who would see them as threats to be eliminated rather than futures to be protected. But tomorrow could wait. Tonight, we had survived the impossible. Tonight, 5 hearts beat where the world said none should exist. Tonight, the rejected Omega and the ruthless King stood together in the moonlight, holding the futures they'd fought kingdoms to protect. If this story moved you, if you believe in impossible futures and the strength it takes to protect them, then Kismet Romance Collection needs you. Subscribe, because these stories only exist when you make them matter. Drop a comment. Are you Team Sarah or Team Dominic? You can share this with someone who needs to believe that even in the darkest winter, the moon is watching. Your support isn't just a like. It's proof that impossible love stories deserve to be told. Now go, spread the word, and I'll see you in the next impossible journey. And as Luna's tiny hand wrapped around my finger, I made a silent promise to all 5 of my children. You will never know rejection. You will never be called cursed. You will grow up knowing that you are loved, protected, and celebrated for exactly what you are. Impossible miracles who change the world simply by existing. The moon bore witness. And somewhere in the distance, I swear I heard it whisper back, "Well done, little Omega. Well done."